A heartfelt thank you for stopping by. Before we plunge together into a story that will make you ponder, a tale of darkness and fear that spread across America, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy gripping, mysterious, and insightful stories like this, please take a moment to subscribe/follow, hit the like button on this video, and leave a comment. It genuinely helps me a lot to bring you even more captivating content. Are you ready? Let us step together into the world of The Phantom's Shadow, where the line between peace and terror is forever blurred. The crisp autumn air in Havenwood, Montana, usually carried the scent of pine and impending winter, a comforting aroma that spoke of quiet lives and tight-knit communities. But on the night of October 12, 2023, the air was thick with something else. A chilling premonition, though no one recognized it until it was too late. Havenwood was a town that prided itself on its low crime rate, its picturesque main street, and the kind of neighbors who still left their doors unlocked. That illusion was shattered with the discovery of Evelyn Reed. Evelyn, a spry 72-year-old, lived alone in a charming, slightly dilapidated Victorian house at the edge of town. Her garden a riot of late-season blooms she tended with an almost religious devotion. Her disappearance wasn't immediately alarming. Evelyn was known for impromptu trips to visit her sister in Spokane. But when her prize-winning hybrid tea roses started to wilt from neglect and her favorite tabby, Marmalade, began howling plaintively at her empty porch, a quiet concern began to ripple through the town's small social circles. It was her neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, armed with a plate of her famous lemon bars and a growing sense of unease, who finally forced open Evelyn's front door with a spare key Evelyn had given her years ago. The scene inside wasn't one of disarray, which in itself was disturbing. The house was meticulously clean, almost sterile. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle, just an overwhelming sense of absence. Until Mrs. Henderson noticed the faint, metallic tang in the air, a scent that clung to the antique lace curtains and the polished oak floors. And then the note. It wasn't a ransom note, nor a suicide letter. It was a single sheet of cream-colored stationery, placed precisely in the center of Evelyn's antique writing desk, held down by a smooth river stone she'd picked up from a local creek. The handwriting was elegant, almost artistic, in a dark calligraphic script. The soil is fertile and the seeds are sown. A new harvest begins. Mrs. Henderson, a woman who had seen her fair share of life's mundane tragedies, felt an icicle of pure dread pierce her heart. This wasn't just a missing person. This was something profoundly wrong. The Havenwood Sheriff's Department, a team consisting of Sheriff Brody, Deputy Jenkins, and the part-time dispatcher, was ill-equipped for such an anomaly. Sheriff Brody, a man whose biggest case in 20 years had been a missing prize-winning cow, stared at the note with a furrowed brow, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by a look of bewildered horror. He called the state police, then the FBI. This felt bigger than Havenwood. Detective Miles Corbin, a man whose face seemed etched with the grim realities of his profession, received the call in his cluttered office in Helena, the state capital, 2 hours away. Corbin was known for his sharp mind, his uncanny ability to piece together fragments, and a perpetually tired gaze that had seen too much human cruelty. The details of the Havenwood case were scant. An elderly woman, no forced entry, no obvious motive, and a cryptic note. It had the hallmarks of something deeply unsettling. He arrived in Havenwood to find a town buzzing with a mixture of fear and disbelief. News vans from Spokane and Missoula had descended, their satellite dishes glinting under the Montana sun. Evelyn Reed's face, smiling from an old photograph, was plastered across every local news channel. "Sheriff Brody," Corbin said, shaking the older man's hand. "Tell me everything." Brody, clearly out of his depth, laid out the sparse facts. "No signs of struggle, detective. It's like she vanished into thin air. Her car's still in the garage. Her purse, wallet, keys all here. Even her meds are untouched." Corbin examined the note, running a gloved finger over the elegant script. "The soil is fertile, and the seeds are sown." He murmured the words aloud, a chilling thought beginning to form. This isn't just about Evelyn Reed, is it? 2 weeks later, the nascent fear in Havenwood erupted into outright panic. Arthur Finch, a reclusive but respected local historian, was found dead in his home, a sprawling, book-filled abode on the other side of town. Unlike Evelyn, Arthur had been found. His body was discovered by his cleaning lady, slumped over his antique desk, a rare first edition of a Montana history book splayed open beneath his lifeless hands. He had been suffocated, and next to him, on a piece of identical cream-colored stationery, held down by another smooth river stone, was a new note. The first bloom opens, fragile and pure. More will follow, for the garden demands its due. The meticulousness of the crime scenes was unnerving. Again, no forced entry, no struggle. Arthur Finch, a man in his late 60s, physically frail but mentally sharp, had offered no resistance, or perhaps hadn't been given the chance. His house, like Evelyn's, was undisturbed, save for the grim tableau. 2 victims, Corbin stated in a press conference that day, his voice grave, his eyes scanning the worried faces of the townspeople and the hungry lenses of the cameras. 2 distinct individuals, no apparent connection. 2 notes. We are investigating these as linked homicides. We believe we are dealing with a serial killer. The words, spoken aloud, sent a collective shiver through the nation. Havenwood, Montana, a dot on the map, was now the epicenter of a chilling mystery. The media christened the unknown perpetrator the Havenwood Gardener, a name that simultaneously captured the killer's macabre calling card and the idyllic setting he had so brutally defiled. Corbin felt the weight of it all. He was working with a small team from the state police and a handful of FBI agents who had flown in, but the lack of traditional evidence was crippling. No fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses. It was as if a ghost was gliding through the quiet streets of Havenwood, plucking lives like withered leaves. He spent hours poring over the victims' lives, searching for a connection. Evelyn Reed, a retired teacher, a pillar of the community, involved in various charities. Arthur Finch, a scholar, a quiet man who dedicated his life to history. No shared enemies, no common financial dealings, no secret pasts that intertwined. They were, on the surface, just good, ordinary people. The notes, they were the only real clue. Corbin brought in a forensic linguistics expert, Dr. Eris Thorne, a sharp, quirky woman with an encyclopedic knowledge of language patterns. The prose is almost poetic, detective, Thorne observed, adjusting her spectacles as she studied the copies of the notes. Cultivated, precise. The allusions to gardening, to nature, it's deliberate. Not just a signature, but a mission statement. A mission for what? Corbin grumbled, rubbing his temples. The sleepless nights were catching up. That's the terrifying part, isn't it? Thorne replied, her gaze distant. He believes he is tending a garden. And in a garden, things are pruned, weeded out. New life is encouraged. But what kind of new life? And at what cost? The fear in Havenwood was palpable. Neighbors eyed each other with suspicion. Doors that had always been open were now bolted shut. Children who once played freely in the streets were kept indoors. The town was suffocating under an invisible shroud of terror. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of a floorboard, became a potential threat. Corbin knew time was running out. Serial killers rarely stopped on their own. The gardener was escalating, growing bolder. The first 2 victims were relatively isolated. What would the next bloom be? He had a terrible feeling that the tranquility of Havenwood was just the beginning. A small patch of earth where a much larger, more insidious garden was about to be cultivated across the sprawling landscape of America. The seeds were sown, indeed, and the nation was about to witness a harvest of unprecedented terror. The first chapter of fear had just begun, etched in the blood-stained soil of a small Montana town. The Havenwood Gardener quickly outgrew his provincial moniker. Just 3 weeks after Arthur Finch's murder, the terror migrated east, crossing state lines and plunging a bustling metropolis into a new kind of dread. The target this time was not an elderly recluse or a beloved community figure, but a high-profile target. Senator Thomas Albright, a rising star in the Republican Party, known for his staunch conservative views and his vocal advocacy for traditional family values. Albright was found in his lavish Washington, D.C. townhouse, meticulously arranged in his study, a single red rose placed on his chest. He, too, had been suffocated. The note, identical in stationery and script, had a chilling new message. The thorny vine strangles the tender shoots. A cleansing pruning is essential for true growth. The national media went into a frenzy. A serial killer, initially dismissed as a local oddity in Montana, had now struck at the heart of American power. The FBI, already involved, escalated the investigation to the highest priority. Detective Miles Corbin, now a central figure in the multi-agency task force, felt a cold dread settle deep in his bones. This was no longer just a case. It was a nationwide epidemic of fear. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Every politician, every public figure suddenly felt vulnerable. The theories proliferated. A political assassination? A radical extremist? A deranged cult? The gardener had transcended local folklore and become a terrifying symbol of anarchy, striking at will, anywhere, anytime. Corbin found himself at the head of a massive investigation, coordinating between local D.C. Metro Police, the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, BAU, and even Secret Service liaisons. The task force headquarters, a repurposed government building, buzzed with activity, but it was a desperate, uncoordinated hum. Too many leads, too much information, too little concrete evidence. The killer left no forensic signature, no fingerprints, no DNA, no forced entry. It was as if he materialized, committed his atrocity, and then dissolved back into the shadows. Dr. Eris Thorne, the forensic linguist, was flown in from Montana. She stood before a whiteboard covered in the killer's elegant script, her brow furrowed in concentration. The rhetoric is escalating, detective. From sowing seeds to pruning. There's a clear ideological underpinning here. He sees himself as a judge, an arbiter of what constitutes true growth in his twisted garden. But who is he judging? Corbin asked, gesturing at a wall of victim photos. Evelyn Reed, Arthur Finch, Senator Albright. What connects an old teacher, a historian, and a senator? They're all, in their own ways, symbols, Thorne mused. Evelyn Reed, the matriarch, the community's heart. Arthur Finch, the keeper of history, the town's memory. Senator Albright, a voice of authority, a shaper of the nation's future. He's not just killing people, Miles. He's attacking the very fabric of society, one symbolic figure at a time. The media, insatiable and relentless, had now dubbed him the American Gardener, a terrifying evolution from his Havenwood beginnings. Cable news channels ran 24/7 specials, dissecting every angle, interviewing every expert, and inadvertently fueling the killer's mystique. Public opinion was sharply divided. Some called for harsh crackdowns on any perceived deviance, fearing the killer was striking at immoral elements. Others saw him as a symptom of deeper societal decay. The fear was weaponized, turning neighbor against neighbor, ideology against ideology. Corbin and his team were drowning in tips hundreds every day. Psychics, conspiracy theorists, disgruntled neighbors all calling in, claiming to have the answer. Every quiet, unassuming man in America suddenly looked suspicious. Every person with a gardening hobby became a potential suspect. The sheer volume was paralyzing. Then came the next victim just a week after Senator Albright. This time, the location was Los Angeles, California. Dr. Lena Petrova, a renowned geneticist and outspoken advocate for stem cell research, was found in her sprawling Hollywood Hills home. Again, the meticulous scene. No forced entry, no struggle, a single white orchid on her chest. The note. The misguided root twists the future's promise. A selective culling ensures the rightful path. The choice of victim was jarringly different from Senator Albright. Dr. Petrova, a progressive scientist, stood in stark contrast to the conservative politician. The killer was not targeting a specific political ideology. He's attacking symbols of disagreement, Thorne concluded, her voice urgent. Or rather, symbols that represent what he perceives as societal flaws or deviations from his ideal garden. Evelyn Reed represented the past, perhaps a stagnant past. Arthur Finch, tradition. Albright, a certain brand of political power. Dr. Petrova, scientific progress. He's a purist, Miles. He believes he's removing what he sees as impurities to cultivate a perfect society. Corbin felt a surge of frustration. But what is his perfect society? How do we profile a man who targets such disparate individuals? The BAU unit, led by seasoned profiler agent Sarah Jennings, struggled. He's highly intelligent, highly organized, Jennings explained in a tense meeting. He has an intimate knowledge of his victims' routines and security. He's likely charming, unassuming, able to blend into any environment. He leaves no trace because he doesn't touch anything unnecessarily, or he uses gloves, and he likely cleans as he goes. The lack of struggle suggests he either surprises them completely, or he's chosen victims who wouldn't fight back, or perhaps even welcomed him in. The possibility that victims were letting him into their homes was particularly chilling. Was he someone they knew? Someone they trusted? Corbin became consumed. He barely slept, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the gnawing guilt that he wasn't doing enough. His own family, hundreds of miles away, called with worried voices, but he could only offer curt reassurances. He saw the gardener in every shadowed doorway, heard him in every whisper of the wind. He began to notice patterns within the notes themselves, beyond the linguistic analysis. The specific type of paper, the ink, the river stones, they were all consistent. He put out a national alert for anyone who recognized the specific paper brand or the type of river stone. It was a long shot, but they were desperate. One late night, staring at a map of the United States dotted with the grim locations of the murders, Corbin saw something that made the hair on his arms stand up. Havenwood, D.C., Los Angeles. They weren't just random points. They formed a rough, irregular triangle across the continental U.S. Was it just a coincidence? Or was the gardener sending a message about his reach, his omnipresence? Then a breakthrough, small but significant. A retired paper mill worker from upstate New York, watching a news report about the distinctive cream-colored stationery, called the FBI hotline. He recognized it. It was a specialized artisan paper, custom-made in very small batches by a particular, almost archaic process. The mill had closed down decades ago, but he remembered the unique texture and faint watermark. And only one person had ever ordered it in significant quantities for personal use. A man named Silas Blackwood. Silas Blackwood. The name sent a jolt through the task force. He was a reclusive horticulturalist and philosopher, known for his esoteric writings on social ecology and the pruning of society to achieve an idealized natural order. He had published several obscure but highly influential books in the 80s and 90s, advocating for a radical reevaluation of human civilization, often using botanical metaphors. He had a small, dedicated following of intellectuals and fringe thinkers. He owned a sprawling, self-sustaining estate in rural New Hampshire, funded by a significant inheritance, where he cultivated rare plants and maintained an extensive library. A quick background check revealed a life of quiet academic pursuits, no criminal record, no history of violence. He had lectured at various universities in his younger years, including a guest lecture at a small college in Montana, just miles from Havenwood, coincidentally around the time Evelyn Reed went missing. He had also given a series of talks in D.C. a few months before Senator Albright's murder, and attended a prestigious scientific conference in L.A. earlier that year, where Dr. Petrova had been a keynote speaker. He moved in circles that would have given him access and opportunity. Corbin felt a cold certainty. The disparate victims, the philosophical notes, the meticulousness, it all clicked into place. Silas Blackwood wasn't just a suspect. He was likely the American gardener. But apprehending him would be another challenge entirely. Blackwood's estate was like a fortress, nestled deep in the woods, protected by natural barriers and an almost fanatical devotion to privacy. He was brilliant, cunning, and had proven himself capable of evading the most sophisticated law enforcement in the country. The serpent had uncoiled, its true form now dimly perceived, but its fangs were still hidden, and its next strike could be anywhere, at anyone. The nation held its breath, gripped by a terror that felt both distant and terrifyingly close, waiting for the reckoning. The identification of Silas Blackwood as the primary suspect brought a new, chilling clarity to the American Gardner case, but it was far from a resolution. Blackwood's sprawling estate in New Hampshire, known locally as the Verdant Sanctuary, became the focal point of a massive, covert surveillance operation. Situated deep within the White Mountains, the property was a meticulously maintained labyrinth of gardens, greenhouses, and a fortified main house, surrounded by dense forest. Blackwood, it turned out, lived up to his reclusive reputation, venturing out rarely, and then only for specific, pre-planned engagements, often obscure academic symposia or rare plant auctions. Detective Miles Corbin, now operating under the immense pressure of the national spotlight, led the ground team. The FBI's hostage rescue team, HRT, and local SWAT units were on standby, but the order from the Attorney General was clear. Blackwood was to be apprehended alive, if possible, for interrogation. His philosophical ramblings, his motives, and the full extent of his network, if any, were critical to understand. "We can't just storm the place," Agent Jennings from the Bayou cautioned during a tense briefing. "He's aware of our presence, even if he hasn't shown it. This man is highly intelligent and believes he is on a sacred mission. He won't go down quietly, and he might have traps, or even a contingency plan to self-terminate rather than be captured." Corbin stared at the detailed schematics of the Verdant Sanctuary. The sheer number of botanical specimens, the intricate irrigation systems, the hidden pathways, it was a killer's paradise. "His garden is his sanctuary, his ideology made manifest," Corbin observed, tapping a finger on a blueprint of a particularly dense rose garden. "He sees himself as the ultimate gardener. We need to disrupt his sense of control." A plan slowly took shape, born out of desperation and a deep understanding of Blackwood's psyche. They wouldn't force entry. They would lure him out. The key was the next symbolic target, the one that would complete his twisted narrative. Dr. Eris Thorne had provided critical insight. His sequence of victims, the matriarch, the historian, the politician, the scientist, each represents a pillar of society that, in his view, has become corrupt or misaligned. The final victim will likely be the capstone, the ultimate symbol of what he believes needs pruning for his true growth to begin. After agonizing deliberation, they identified the likely final target, Justice Eleanor Vance, an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, a venerable figure known for her unyielding interpretations of the Constitution and her fierce independence. She represented the ultimate arbiter of law, the very foundation of justice, a perfect, powerful symbol for Blackwood to symbolically dismantle. The plan was audacious and risky. They would leak carefully controlled information to the media, suggesting that Justice Vance was about to deliver a landmark ruling on a highly controversial case, a ruling that, if it went Blackwood's way, would be deemed a step towards his idealized society, or, if it went against him, would be seen as the ultimate corruption he needed to prune. The goal was to make her a prime target, visible, vulnerable, and a final, irresistible challenge. Justice Vance, though initially hesitant, agreed to cooperate after a sobering briefing on the potential consequences of Blackwood's continued freedom. Her D.C. residence became the epicenter of an elaborate sting operation, with layers of hidden surveillance and an elite protection detail disguised as staff and neighbors. Corbin, Jennings, and Thorne moved into a command center nearby, watching every feed, listening to every whisper. Days stretched into a week, then two. Blackwood remained elusive, his movements within his estate observed but offering no direct link to the outside world. The media, however, bit onto the manufactured leak about Justice Vance with ravenous hunger. Her face, her pronouncements, her every move became national news. The pressure on Blackwood, subtle at first, began to mount. Then, on a cold, blustery Tuesday night, the signal came. A single, distinctively shaped riverstone was found on Justice Vance's front porch, placed just so, next to a single, deep purple hyacinth Blackwood's calling card, and a new, chilling flower. It meant he had already been there, undetected. He had surveyed his next bloom. Panic rippled through the command center. "He's too close," an agent exclaimed. No, Corbin said, his voice quiet but firm. He's exactly where we want him. He's challenged us. He's ready to finish his garden. The note, delivered anonymously to a national news outlet, appeared online an hour later, held down by the same kind of river stone, its image chillingly displayed on every screen. The ultimate root, entwined in concrete, stifles the nascent seed. Only by severing this deepest knot can true freedom blossom. The harvest is nigh. The ultimate root, Justice Vance, the foundation of the law. The concrete, the very structures of society he despised. The next evening, Justice Vance was scheduled to deliver a pre-recorded statement to the public regarding the controversial ruling. This was the trap. Blackwood, they theorized, would attempt to strike during this moment, turning a symbolic legal act into a horrifying act of defiance. The D.C. residence was a fortress of hidden agents, snipers on rooftops, and plainclothes officers mingling with a carefully curated press contingent. Corbin was positioned in a discreet surveillance van, his eyes glued to the monitors, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm. Then, through a blind spot in the elaborate security, it happened. A figure, slender and cloaked in dark, almost invisible clothing, moved with impossible stealth across Justice Vance's meticulously manicured garden. He seemed to melt from shadow to shadow, an almost ethereal presence. It was Silas Blackwood. He was inside the house within minutes, his movements fluid, purposeful. He bypassed security systems that should have caught him, slipping past agents like a ghost. He was unarmed, save for a small, sharp pruning knife at his belt, a symbolic tool, not one meant for a violent struggle. His true weapon was his intellect, his ability to manipulate, to instill fear. He found Justice Vance in her study, preparing for the broadcast, flanked by two undercover marshals disguised as her aides. Blackwood entered with a calm, almost serene smile. "Justice Vance," he said, his voice soft, cultivated, exactly as Thorne had predicted. "It is an honor to finally meet the ultimate architect of our garden." Before the marshals could react, Blackwood produced a small silver mist sprayer from his pocket, releasing a fine, almost invisible aerosol into the air. It was a potent, fast-acting sedative, designed for knockout rather than harm another of his meticulous, nonviolent methods of control. The marshals slumped almost immediately, unconscious. Justice Vance, startled, gasped, but the effects were already taking hold. She swayed, her eyes fluttering. "Do not worry, Justice," Blackwood purred, catching her as she fell, gently laying her down on a velvet chaise lounge. "You are merely being pruned. The garden demands renewal." Corbin, watching through the tiny camera lens hidden in Vance's study, saw it all unfold with horrifying clarity. Blackwood hadn't intended to kill her immediately. He intended to stage the scene, to make a statement, to prove his power. "Go! Go! Go!" Corbin roared into his comms. The house exploded with activity. Agents burst through doors, their weapons raised. But Blackwood, always one step ahead, seemed to anticipate their every move. He moved with an almost balletic grace, darting through the complex architecture of the house, a shadow slipping through the light. The chase was brief, brutal. Blackwood, cornered in a sunroom filled with exotic plants, moved with a surprising agility for a man of his age. He wasn't fighting back violently, but evading, trying to disappear. He saw Corbin enter, gun raised, and a flicker of something almost like admiration, or perhaps disdain, crossed Blackwood's face. "Detective Corbin," he said, a faint smile playing on his lips, his eyes gleaming with a chilling satisfaction. "You understand, don't you? The necessity of it all." "I understand you're a murderer," Corbin retorted, his voice raw with exhaustion and fury. "And you're finished." Blackwood laughed, a soft, dry sound. "Finished? Oh no, detective. The seeds I've sown are not easily eradicated. They are in the soil, in the minds, in the fear. The garden will grow with or without me." In that moment of theatrical defiance, a hidden FBI sniper, positioned on a rooftop across the street, took his shot. A single, clean hit to Blackwood's leg. He crumpled, his cultivated composure finally breaking into a grunt of pain. Agents swarmed him, securing him quickly. Silas Blackwood, the American gardener, was captured. The aftermath was a blur of media frenzy, relief, and a lingering sense of unease. Justice Vance recovered quickly, deeply shaken but unharmed. The nation breathed a collective sigh of relief, but Blackwood's words, his chilling ideology, had already taken root. In the interrogation room, Blackwood was calm, almost philosophical. He spoke for hours, not confessing in the traditional sense, but expounding on his vision. His belief that he was merely a catalyst, a necessary force to prune a decadent society. He felt no remorse, only a profound sense of purpose. Corbin watched him, a knot of exhaustion and lingering dread in his stomach. Blackwood's garden, he realized, wasn't just about the physical deaths. It was about the fear, the division, the introspection forced upon a nation. He had exposed vulnerabilities, shattered illusions of safety, and planted seeds of doubt and paranoia that would linger long after his capture. Silas Blackwood was sentenced to multiple life terms, his philosophical ramblings becoming an object of fascination for psychologists and criminologists. But his impact transcended the courtroom. America had been irrevocably changed. The doors that were once unlocked remained bolted. The idyllic small towns felt a tremor of fear beneath their surface. The public discourse became more fractured, more suspicious, reflecting the very divisions Blackwood had aimed to prune. Corbin, hailed as a hero, returned to his quiet life, but the phantom's shadow never truly left him. He saw Blackwood's garden everywhere, in the news, in the arguments, in the subtle shifts of societal trust. The harvest was indeed nigh, as Blackwood had promised. Not a harvest of death, but a harvest of fear, suspicion, and a chilling reminder that the human mind, in its darkest corners, can cultivate the most terrifying visions imaginable. The American gardener was gone, but his garden, invisible and insidious, continued to grow.